All right, guys, how you going? I'm Chewy. We're here with Steve Meek. He's the founder of Meek Boys Bicycles, and we're here to talk a little bit about the Meek Boys range of full carbon kids downhill bikes. Now, this is a fairly sort of niche market, and I think Steve from Meek Boys is definitely the first one to actually pioneer this sort of high-end carbon downhill bikes specifically for kids. There's actually 3 bikes in the range. We're starting over here at the 20-inch wheel size. The one in the middle here is the 24-inch wheel size, and this one on the end is actually a 26-inch wheel downhill bike. Now, let's start first with what ages can the kids get on the 20-inch? Would that be sort of say
5-year-olds?
5-year-olds?
Big 5-year-old.
Yep.
Right through to 10.
All the way through to 10. So,
yeah.
So a tall 5-year-old, say, to a short 10-year-old.
Yes.
Okay. Normally, when I measure up kids for bikes, you know, we go by height, but we'll just keep it easy and say, let's say 5 to 10
yep.
max range on this one for the 20-inch, and then you move up to the 24-inch. So this would be, say, from.
It's usually about 7.5. Depends on the size, but usually 8. 8 to 9. They start coming onto this bike.
Yep.
If they're a big child. And then they can go right through to the 12-year-old.
So 8 to 12 for this one for the range, depending on their height. Okay, and then the 26-inch, you're looking at, say, what, 11 upwards?
Yeah, 11 upwards. This is the big machine. So for the kids sending off the big jumps, and goes right through until the bike's just too small.
Too small for them, yeah. So after this one, they sort of go to a full adult small after that.
Yeah, a ladies out, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then we've got the 20-inch wheels. We've got how much travel we got on the front and rear of this one?
Right, this one here, we got 100 mils in the back.
100 mil travel?
And 120 mils in the front.
100 mil back, 120 in the front. So that's quite long for such a small bike, isn't it?
Yep, so that gives lots of safety for the kids. If they land nose heavy or land back heavy, the bike will save them. Take the suspension, suck it up.
Okay, so if we're comparing this to something else that would be on the market now, what sort of travel are the kids with 20-inch wheels sort of riding at the moment?
They generally have no travel or about 50 mil travel, but all the linkage is only single pivot linkage, where this one here is double pivot linkage.
Oh, okay.
So when the bike lands on a big jump, it actually extends the bike in length and makes the bike a little bit longer, makes it more stable in the corners and landing big jumps.
Okay.
So this is like a adult's bike.
So you got a full adult downhill linkage that you've made up, and you were saying earlier that the shock pressures that you're running now in these shocks is actually equivalent to what an adult would run, because the linkage is designed specifically for kids' bikes, so everything will work with the normal pressures. You were saying before when you were designing your previous kids' bikes that the trouble you were having is you'd have to let the shock pressure down so much to get them to work that you'd sort of negate your rebound in your compression settings.
Yes, this is the way it's gone. So most kids' bikes out there cannot run the high pressure. So they look good, the suspension goes up and down, but it doesn't perform. So they're only running 40 psi or less in the back shocks to make it work for the small kids. Where a young 6-year-old and this will be up to 80 psi to start with. A 10-year-old on this bike will be running about 160 psi in the rear shock.
Oh, that's great. So you can use all your rebound and compression settings as normal.
And you can take it off the shelf shock, put it on the bike, and it will work perfectly.
Oh, excellent. That's right. So you're running a Fox float on this one, and I noticed previous incarnations have had the Olin's shocks in there as well.
Yes, we tried the Olin's out. That was very good. They're very good shocks. But just, price range was a wee bit high for us at the time. So
okay, cool.
These.
So you can go anything off the shelf and bolt them straight on.
Yes.
So is Dad going to nick these shocks for his bike?
That's the one.
That's right.
Actually, this shock here is going on Dad's bike.
Look at this one. We've got a Fox Float X2 on this one. So this is exactly the same. You run an off-the-shelf shock on the on everything in the range?
That's it. Everything on the range, straight off the shelf. The only difference is we put the roller bearings in the shocks to stop the stiction in the shocks, so the shock runs even more smooth for the kids.
Okay, and you've got you look at that. You got the RWC shocks in there. Try and get that in the video. Lockouts and things like that for the kids?
Yes, the little one, we have full lockout front and back, so the kids can take it at the skate park, or if they want to do some cross-country riding, they can lock it out, put the seat up, and start pedaling around the hills.
BMX track and things like that, yeah.
This one, as you know, with the Fox X2 comes with a lockout in the back, so If you run with the X2, which I recommend for this bike, we put one extra volume spacer in there to beef it up, because it's got so much leverage in the shock. That means the shock can run very soft to take up the small bumps for the low kids, but then still ramp up for when they want to do the big jumps.
Okay, so why carbon for these bikes? Why not make them out of aluminium or something like that?
We need to get the weight down. It's the kids for weight, so when they're doing the big jumps, the bike's not falling away from them when they drop off the big jumps. This is the big issue with the kids. They can do the jumps, but the bike's doing it without them having any control. Now they can whip it, move it round. So we're trying to get the bike as light as possible.
Kids are like me, not very strong, so having a light bike is going to definitely help them on the trails. You know, be able to point the bike where they need it to go and do jumps and things like that. That's just pretty cool.
And same with the wheels. So for the wheels, we've gone full carbon.
Full carbon on the rims, nice.
And titanium spokes.
Titanium spokes, keep the weight down.
So this is to keep the unsprung weight down, so the shock can work better.
That's right.
And that's more so for kids. We've got to get that weight right down, otherwise the shock will not perform.
Yeah, that's right. There's lots of talk about sprung versus unsprung mass ratios on downhill bikes and stuff like that now. So having that wheel weight down is going to be a huge advantage for how the bike tracks over the terrain and things like that, and be able to hold the ground and go over the bumps very well. You've got a 26-inch wheel version over here, and these two look pretty similar spec. What sort of travel have we got on the 24-inch wheel bike?
This one has got 180 in the back.
180 in the rear.
And 180 in the rear.
180 in the fork.
Yep.
Nice. And this has a full DH fork on it as well. You've got a Fox 40 on the front there.
So we have 185 in the back.
185 in the rear.
And then we got the big 200 in the front.
200 in the front.
And yeah, this is for the big jumps, all the downhill. Same thing, we've done all the same thing. So we've set the linkage up so it works for the young kids. We can get, high pressures in the shock, so it's working properly. Get that leverage working. We've got the double linkage, so the bike stretches out in the corners.
And the boys have been testing these. Where have they been riding these ones?
Lately, up here in Taimashan, Toby's been testing it off the Rock Drop and a few other good trails in Hong Kong, and it's standing up very well. We've got Hong Kong's very rough. The terrain is not. It's all single track, it's rocky. Really test the bike. Really
technical terrain, yep. Slippery and horrible. What about in Whistler? How'd you go over the jumps in Whistler?
Yeah, no problem there at all. Toby's clearing all the big jumps. He's set crabapple, everything else in this.
I saw him doing whips over the crabapple jumps, right?
Yes, he even got a no-hander over the crabapple there.
Bikes are loving it.
Yeah, no, the bike is handling really well. He did the Kabonza race this year in Whistler, which is a very rough, gnarly trail, and he loved it. The bike was performing wonderfully.
Okay. All right, Steve, so we're talking about full carbon downhill bikes at the moment for kids, yep. And I kind of want to just address the elephant in the room for these bikes, and it's definitely going to be the price. You've got the 20-inch wheel kids bicycle starting in at $6,500 US, yep. All the way up to the 26-inch full kids downhill bike at $8,000 US. Now, when parents hear that price, they're going to go, wow. Obviously, when they see the bikes, they're going to go, wow. But when they hear the price, that's also a wow moment, because this is, let's say, this is definitely unprecedented price for children's bikes. Okay, it's more than double the next kid's bike of I guess the same age range. But for me, you don't really have to justify it to me because I'm a bike guy. But let's say to other parents, how I would compare this in real world terms would be, let's say you buy a car for your kid. Okay, that car's going to be $5,000 to $20,000 US. Okay, that car is going to get you to school, it's going to get you to work, it's going to get you to the shops, it's going to get you to the cinema to take your mates out and things like that. That car is not a race car. If your kid comes to you and says, I want a race car, then how much is that going to cost? You're looking at bulk money. These are race bikes. They serve a specific purpose. These aren't for knocking around with your buddies. They're not for riding to the shops to get milk. They're not for riding to school.
Yep.
These are race bikes for downhill racing for kids. They're a specific piece of equipment, and they're priced as such. So, you know, when you look at the component spec on it, compare that to an adult's bike of the same spec, then you're looking at a very well-priced bike. I think an adult bike with carbon wheels, titanium spokes, you've got Hope Pro 4 hubs, Fox front and rear. You know, these are no holds barred, the best possible components you can put on bikes. You're going to be looking at over $10,000 US. So when you compare it that way, I think the prices are super reasonable. Yeah, like I said, it's going to be an unprecedented thing that parents just need to get their head around what they're buying for their kids.
Yes, and if you look into other sports, if you look into, say, go-karting or anything like that, the prices are right up there, and parents are happy to spend. I'm into the BMXing as well. The boys do the BMXing.
Yep.
And our price range for the BMXs are not far off these. The time you go for carbon frames for BMX bikes now, ceramic bearings through the bike, the prices are creeping right up, very close actually, and you have to change a BMX bike every year. Like the little bike here lasts for 4 or 5 years.
That's right.
No
you have
problem.
To, you have to change the little BMX bikes every year for the sizing?
Yes, for the sizing. So you change the bikes, the cranks, you change most things every year. So you've got to upgrade every year on a BMX bike. And if you're into the racing scene, you want the top, the best, the fastest. And this is the same. But we've got to look into the safety too for these bikes. The other reason having such good suspension, if your child is starting to do big jumps, you want them to land safely. And if they get it slightly wrong, these bikes and the suspension will help you out.
I know for me, if I'm riding a cheap bike or borrow a buddy's bike and we send it down the mountain, it's yeah, you do get caught out occasionally. So having the big bikes that work very well and the big suspension is definitely going to be a help. And I mean, you look at some of the things these kids are doing now. I mean, Toby hitting crabapple hits at age 11, clearing all 4 jumps. You know, and you've got the kids riding Whistler, the racing in Whistler, the racing in US, the racing in New Zealand. They've got Crankworks, they've got Kids Works, they've got things like Grom Page, which is the kids' rampage, you know, and some of the things that these kids are going down, you definitely need a top of the range, you know, tool for the job.
And this is why I've gone for the top of the range brakes as well. So when the kids are putting their brakes on, they can do the same as us. They can use one finger, so that the rest of the hand is hanging onto the handlebars. It's taking the whole hand off the handlebar, which is unsafe, and put the brakes on, which you do on the cheaper versions. So the best brakes you can get, then the kids can just use one finger, and they've got all the braking coming in.
Yeah, I notice that a lot when we put the kids on the bikes. You know, you've got the brakes that you can adjust very nice and close to the grips. That's important. Having brakes that are easy to pull, because kids' hands aren't very strong. So having brakes super easy to pull is going to be a big help. Having hydraulic disc brakes is obviously makes sense for kids. You know, you see kids' bikes, they've got, I call them token disc brakes, where they've got a disc brake, but it's got a cable actuation, and you know, there's not enough strength to pull it to get it to stop. So especially with a kid, you know, they've got small hands, weak hands, so having strong brakes is a must, for especially for downhill stuff.
And same with the shifter. Trying to go, the XO is very expensive, but the same again, the kids can change very easily. It's soft on their hands, so they can change it with one finger, with their thumb. They can change it very easily, where a lot of the cheaper versions are very hard to change, and they're not very precise, so the kids have got to push so hard to change the gears. So if they're in racing mode, they can just one click and they're through another gear.
Well, if parents have got the good stuff, why can't the kids?
Exactly.
It's not fair, is it? Why should dad have the good stuff and then take your kid riding and expect your kid to do all the same trail? So, yeah, now good luck keeping up with your kids, mate.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
They'll pass you quickly.